Welcome to the forum on Monday, April 25th. We have a wonderful program ahead of us. Folks, today we had 3 of the 5 declared candidates for the Republican nomination for governor committed. All 5 were invited. 3 said they were coming, and just over the weekend I learned that Mr. Niemeyer has a death in the family and he is unable to be here today. When I was in private practice counseling, when people missed appointments, there were only 2 good reasons. One, they were going to pay me anyway, or there was death in the family. Ladies and gentlemen, we will miss him, but we have with us today Alan Alley and Dr. Bud Pierce. We flipped a coin a little bit to see who would go first, and in just a few moments we'll get to hear Mr. Alley. Just wanted to remind folks that anybody who would like to ask a question when we get to the question point today needs to be a member in good standing of the forum. And for anybody who desperately needs to join, who isn't already a member, we have Eric, the gentleman in the nice suit, waving his hand, who would be very happy to take your money and sign you up. And as a matter of fact, if he hasn't talked to you already, it must mean you're already a member. Ladies and gentlemen, the format. Each candidate will speak for 10 minutes, and at the end of that 10 minutes, we, apparently we do, but I think we're back. At the end of that 10 minutes, I'll come up and we'll open it up to questions. The questioners will sit over here, please. The candidates will be here. When you ask a question, please identify who you are asking the question. Are you asking both candidates or asking just one? Boy, this is interesting to hear that voice like that. Anyway, I think that's basically it for now. I'll get to you later, but for right now, please, Alan Alley, would you please come up?
Let me check the time here. Good afternoon. That's kind of weak. Good afternoon. There we go. In 2009, I walked across the state of Oregon, and it was 400 miles from Baker City to Portland. And one of the things that I would do is I'd start off every speech, I'd say good morning or good afternoon. And when you're out in Baker City, everybody goes, good afternoon. And as I got closer and closer to Portland, it got quieter and quieter and quieter. So I can tell I'm closer to Portland today. First of all, thank you for having us at the forum. I'm an engineer, and I'm kind of a nerd. I happen to be running for governor, and I can actually prove that to you, because I was down in Klamath Falls. I was walking along, and there was a frog, and I picked up the frog, and the frog said, "I'm a beautiful princess. If you kiss me, I'll return to my original form and grant you any wish you want." Looked at the frog, put it in my pocket, kept walking. Frog started kicking like crazy. I pulled the frog out, and the frog said, "Hey, pal, didn't you hear me? I am a beautiful princess. If you kiss me, I'll return to my original form, and I'll grant you any wish you want." And I said, wow, well, you need to understand something. Beautiful princesses and wishes, those are really nice, but I'm an engineer, and a talking frog is totally awesome. Put the frog in my pocket and kept on going. I'm running for governor for a couple of reasons. This is it's a family affair, and you need to have your family in the boat with you in order to do this. And I think we passed out some Alan Alley times. You can learn a little bit more about my family. My wife came to me after Governor Kitzhaber resigned, and she said, "I get it. I understand why you have to do this. And we're with you, and the family's with you, and we're going to be behind you." The second thing was, I was at my 4-year-old grandson's birthday party, and 4-year-olds are a neat age. They're innocent, but they start to communicate. And I realized that pretty much every single one of those kids at that birthday party, pretty much every other kid in America has a better chance of graduating from high school than they do. And that's not what Oregon is about. A little bit about my background. I'm a technology guy. Went to school in Indiana at Purdue. Sorry, Michigan grad. Although I can sing Hail to the Victors, because my dad went to Michigan. Went to school in Indiana, graduated mechanical engineering degree, spent 4 years at Ford, 4 years at Boeing, got involved in technology. I'm exactly the same age as Jobs and Bill Gates. and grew up in technology, grew up doing programming, grew up creating video games, and I actually played video games my whole life because we were designing them. Did an investment here in 1988, and then moved out here with my family in 1992, and we've built and grown companies that sold billions of dollars worth of products and employed hundreds and hundreds of people here, and that's what I've been passionate about doing. Recently got involved with politics a little bit. Governor Kulongoski called me in 2007 and said, I'd like to have you come in and work. I said, you need to understand something. I'm a Republican and you're not. He said, that's okay. You understand some things that I don't have in my administration. So I've done that, got a little bit of experience there, ran for office, and now I'm running for governor here. I'd like to do an exercise with you today. I'd like you to imagine Oregon. What's your vision of Oregon? What's your vision of our education system, of our roads and our infrastructure, of our opportunities, and not just today, but where do you think Oregon can be? And what is your passion about that? And I'll ask you a couple of questions. Does your vision of Oregon include having the lowest graduation rate of high schools in the country? Does it include having basically more families on food stamps than any other state in the country? Does it include a foster care system that gets a report from the federal government that says it's failing pretty much in every way possible? Does it include $195 million for a bridge that we never built, or $310 million for a website that was never delivered? Does your vision include those things? I don't think so. And it's not that your vision is failing, it's the political class in Salem that is failing you. Now, Kate Brown took over this office in a cloud of corruption and scandal. And over the last year, they've been passing the most highly partisan, hyper-partisan legislation that they possibly could be passing. And I'll ask you if that matches your vision that you have for Oregon. They passed a low-carbon fuel standard that I actually worked on in 2007. And the data that we have says it doesn't actually save CO2. So why would you pass a low-carbon fuel standard that doesn't save CO2 but is actually going to cost you more money? In fact, the Oregonian called it a colossal policy stinker. A 50% minimum wage hike that the Oregonian called the Teen Employment Destruction Act. Hyper-partisan leadership where, again, the Oregonian said, it seems like they've forgotten that 62% of Oregonians are not registered as Democrats. In fact, I would say to you, I think many of these policies don't actually represent the 38% that are. It represents a tiny fraction that are. We've increased spending 63% in the last 10 years. That's $27 billion. We have a $21 billion hole in our public employee retirement system. Do any of those things match your vision of Oregon? Does that match the aspirational goals and achievements that you have in your heart for this place? Yet what's happened in Salem, the political class in Salem, has done that to you. I want to talk a little bit about a couple of different ways that we could improve this, a couple of different solutions. First of all, our classrooms. We spend $300,000 or $400,000 per classroom. About $100,000 gets into the classroom. Why is that? And structurally, how could we change that? What if we put that money in the classroom first, and then let the parents and the teachers decide what they want to fund outside of that classroom? And then when your curriculum coordinator for the Education Service District comes in and pitches to you, hey, you should fund me, the parents and the teachers are going to say, well, why would we do that? What benefit does that have for our kids? Debbie and I raise money for classrooms all over the state. We've probably raised in excess of $1 million, helped them in their auctions. Every time we're doing it, it's for technology in the classroom. Why does that get funded so late that we don't put that money there first? When President Obama came here in 2010, I think it was, The one thing that we showed him, the shining light of our education system, was Lego League Robotics and FIRST Robotics. At the time, we funded that with $0. The most important thing, the thing that we were most proud of, we put no money into it. The next biennium, we put $650,000 in. The next biennium, it's down to $250,000 again. Why would the most innovative thing we do in our education system, the thing we show to the President of the United States, why would we not fund that? It just is completely upside down. Another thing that we do is crowdsource the budget analysis. We actually did this in 2010. What does that mean? You post the budget online, and you invite people to come in, transparency that we talked about. You invite people to come in and let them do the analysis. In 2010, we did this. Somebody came in and said, hey, it looks like the Oregon Department of Transportation is about twice the size of the Colorado Department of Transportation. Why is that? Our roads aren't twice as good as Colorado's roads. Well, let's dig into that. Let's understand what are the policies that are driving that. And let's put the things in place where we can change that. The last thing that I'll just talk about, and there's many, many more that we could, is term limits, not just for politicians, but also for laws. Imagine if you had term limits on laws, so that in the last 10 years, we've passed 5,000 new laws. You might not realize that. We've passed 5,000 new laws. Now, if you go back 10 years ago, I would say that nobody would have said, hey, Oregon would be great if we just passed 5,000 new laws, right? So let's have those term limited out. Let's have those laws term limited out. I just want to conclude with, I just walked you through a process where I hope your vision for Oregon is taking shape. Your aspirational vision for the great state that we live in, where we can use these assets and we can move this state forward, that you've begun to formulate that, as I have, and realize that there's this massive disconnect between your vision, your aspiration, what you want for your kids and your grandkids, and what Salem is currently delivering for you and has been delivering for 30 years. Please join with me. Please work with me, and we will make Salem accountable to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alley. Dr. Pierce.
Shouldn't have touched it. Hi, I'm Dr. Bud Pierce, Republican candidate for governor of Oregon. I'm pleased to have my wife Selma in the back of the room shooting Facebook photos for me today and waving. We're having a grand time of this, actually. It's really fun. And Nick Roten of my campaign is back here with me also. So thank you for having us all here today. It's great to be in a census-designated place. If you wiki Aloha, Oregon, that's what it is. Post office in 1912. Tried to incorporate in 1984, told no, you can't do it, you can't provide your own services. And you have about 49,000 people. You're 10 miles from central Portland or downtown Portland. You got a median income of about 53,000. You're doing pretty well out here. So if you live out here, congratulations. So my talk today, I'll start at the end. We'll put the beginning at the end, then you can kind of snooze as I go along here till the question and answer session. But I'm here with the idea that we need to be safer, we need to be more prosperous, and we need to be more free. And I, as your governor, will do everything I can to ensure that that happens. So my background is I'm a janitor's kid. Kind of born out of the hell of World War II, if you talk about it. I was born in Wiesbaden, Germany. My mom and dad met in the Berlin airlift. And I grew up in a small farming town outside of an Air Force base, and janitor at that time. My dad could have a nice little house he could buy, not much, but it was ours. And the neighborhood was safe, and we could go to decent public schools. I think that's a good thing. And I think when you have a society where the janitors are doing okay, I think you're doing okay. And I think that's something you push toward. I'm a Marine. I joined the Marine Corps after my second year of medical school. I had a summer off, went to boot camp, joined the enlisted reserves. And that and my father kind of taught me to say what you mean what you say, and do what you say you're going to do. Just do it. So again, kind of blunt, kind of forceful, kind of plain. Not sure how that plays out in politics, but that's who I am, so that's what you'll hear today. I'm a cancer doctor. I've been at medicine for 39 years, started medical school in 1977, 20 years of education and training. I was a bit slow. 21 years of practice. We've actually done $250 million of medical business over the last 10 years. It's very expensive. I apologize. It's too expensive. 75 employees, 4 sites. Big business. Learned a lot about business management. I think that's important for people to have that background. And we learned how to be frugal because in private practice of medicine, physician-owned practice, we've been frozen in reimbursement for 15 years. And that's why most of your doctors are no longer in private practice. They're employed by other people because those people weren't frozen. Finally, in this run, I am not corruptible. I am running to be a public servant leader, to be a servant leader. I'm not running to be a CEO or a boss or a king or anything like that. I'm just running to try to provide good government and to serve you, the people. And that is my only goal. My ego is satisfied by being a physician and having people that will actually see me. So that satisfied my ego. Now it's about service, and I think it's important for the Republican Party to have Alan Alley and Bud Pierce and Bruce Cuff and Bob Niemeyer and anybody else to run to see if we can get a breakthrough win in this election, because we desperately need Republican Party leadership. So I think it's important, and anyone who can run should run. So a few minutes about what I started my talk about, which is safety, prosperity, and freedom. So I think from the governor's office, the vexing problem of safety that we face is really our inability to deal with mental illness and the homelessness. I think that's our biggest safety issue of today. When you look at our prisons, half the people in prison have mental health issues. 70% of the youth that are involved with our criminal justice system have mental health issues. Lots of people on the streets have mental health issues, and we have addiction issues, which may be tied into that. We do a bad job. By all measures, we do a bad job. We can't seem to gain traction. The problem seems to get worse. We have committed to equality in mental health, but we don't fund it. We don't really have good research. Half our money goes to our central state hospital run by the legislature. If something isn't frightening, that is to me. And about half the money goes out to the counties. We need to do better. Best practices are probably found overseas. Scandinavia is seemingly doing a good job. There's a debate about medicating people or having them not as medicated. But clearly, we have to have more programs in the communities and more prevention. So mental health is a huge issue. Prosperity has many components. But I think in essence, what you want people to have the dignity of a good job. Be able to have the opportunity to have the dignity of a good job. And it's been mentioned before, we lead in such measures as we have lots of people on the Oregon Health Plan, over 1 million. I think it's great that people have insurance because I take care of people, and I've always taken care of the uninsured. It's very hard. But wouldn't it be great if we only had 500,000 or 200,000 because they didn't need it? We have 1 million people on food stamps. Wouldn't it be great if they had a great job so they didn't need food stamps? I mean, honestly, it's about doing everything you can to create the dignity of a great job. That is going to require a lot of help for the private sector. I'm really interested in small business formation. I'm very interested in giving tax credits or tax breaks to entrepreneurs who start small businesses. I'm very interested in giving banks some partial loan guarantees to push money out, some of their own money that they're taking risk for, to help small business startups. I think that's a key to our economic growth more than anything else. We obviously have a lot to do with our educational reform. There are states that have done it very well. If you look at Minnesota, if you look at Massachusetts, they do education much better than we do in terms of performance of their students. It all turns out to be, what's most important is to have a school that is run by the teachers and usually a principal, to have a motivated and well-trained teaching staff, to give them authority and accountability, and you'll do better. I mean, that's in essence the reform of education. You have to throw in career technical, we have to have a common sense curriculum, we have to do all those things, but that in essence is where we need to go. Obviously, higher education has to be affordable. It's killing people to spend $50,000 or $80,000 on education that they can't get a payback on, and a lot of people that go to college probably need career technical education to get them going. We need to bring back manufacturing. We need a greater diversity of jobs. We have to tell the environmentalists that when you don't make it in Oregon, and we're going to make it right here, and we're going to protect the environment here, the whole world is polluted. It's one globe, it's one environment. Same with our natural resource use. When we quit cutting trees down here, they didn't quit cutting them down in the world, they just quit cutting them down here. So when we cut them down here, we replant, we take care of the environment, we can do cross-laminate timber, we can do cross-laminate plywood, we can build 50-story buildings that absorb CO2 instead of producing it. So much we can do, and we just have to convince those who are frightened by the use of our state in the right way that it can be done in an environmentally safe way. We just have to convince people. We need more roads around the Portland area. Definitely need roads. We need a bridge that'll take a lot more cars going toward Washington and back. And we need to develop airports and roads out in the secondary communities, a much more vigorous state. And we need a true deep water port. And I think that Portland has a use, but I think Coos Bay has a interesting potential long-term to be developed as a true deep water port. I'll close with freedom, because we live in an interesting time. And I'm pretty much anybody in this room or me can get up here and talk and say what we want to say, and we're not going to get arrested. I mean, unless you threaten someone, you're not going to be arrested. But you can quite easily say the wrong thing in the wrong place at the wrong time and lose your livelihood like that. You flat lose your livelihood. And that's a strange kind of freedom. And you know what brings this whole idea to mind when you have a society of people that have different ideas, different moral backgrounds, different educational backgrounds, different ways of thinking. What happens when they oppose each other and they butt up against each other? Well, we'll talk about the cake baker. So in the cake baker situation, you're right and you're wrong. It's $130,000. And that's a solution. But that kind of solution leads to really a lot of hatred and animosity. It doesn't make people want to live together. It makes them fearful of their government, makes them fearful to interact, makes them fearful to state what they believe. A much better way is to bring in mediation and reconciliation and tone it down and try to bring the warring parties to a table and try to get a solution and really take it from there. And if you have to have a punishment, it's small and appropriate, because what we've learned in society in general is that appropriate small punishments that fit a transgression lead to a just society. And when you cut the hands off of people that steal in some societies, you don't get rid of theft. You just make people hide things. You make society much more mean and violent. So again, we need to tone it down, and government really needs to be a mediator and bring reconciliation to the forefront. We need to have everyone pulled together. I'm very much for government and the private citizen being on the same side, that when government regulates us, that they're on our side and they're listening to us. And I think that if we think about it that way, that we're all one, we're one Oregon, we don't have this bipartisanship between Republican and Democrat and private and public and East and West and et cetera, et cetera. So that is a goal of my governorship. So to wrap it up, it's all about public safety, it's all about prosperity, and it's all about peace. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Oh, and thank you. I was just going to invite you to come up. Ladies and gentlemen, a couple of things. As people line up here for questions, we'll start that in just a second. I just want to flag you to something. We've had a marvelous experience with a volunteer the last 2 weeks, and some of your board has been working with him to develop a brand new website. If you haven't visited our website, you could visit it now and you'll see the old one that's kind of like, back in the 1890s. But the new one will be available within the next week or so. Please check, because frankly, I'm impressed. Again, we've got some folks lined up. Daniel, if you go to the mic. Now, just real quick, Jim, would you wave your hand, please? Jim is our timekeeper. Questioners have 30 seconds to ask their question, and hopefully they'll keep it in the form of a question. Yeah. And responders will have 2 minutes to respond. Please identify whom you are asking, and if you're asking both candidates, that's fine. Each will have 2 minutes to respond. If you're asking only one candidate and the other candidate wishes to respond, he'll have 1 full minute. The reason I asked Jim to raise his hand is he will have cards and let you know when you have 30 seconds left, or as a responder when you have a minute left and 30 seconds. So I suspect we're going to have an awful lot of questions, and we'd like to have everybody get a chance. So with that, Daniel, first question.
Thank you so much. My question is for both candidates, and I'm here with an organization called Common Cause Oregon, and I have a question about money in politics. Oregon's one of the only states that doesn't have contribution limits. It's one of the only states that doesn't require candidates to put paid for by on the bottom of their campaign materials. And as a result, we've seen the cost of elections go through the roof. It's harder for the average person to be able to run for office. And there's a greater degree of cynicism the public has about the potential for corruption. So I have a two-part question for both candidates. My question number one is, do you see the increasing level of money in politics as a problem in Oregon? And number two is, if you do see it as a problem, what are your exact policy positions you'll push for if you're elected as governor? Thank you.
So thank you for the question, and we had a little bit of an opportunity to talk about it earlier. I think the key is transparency. And that's not just in money and politics. That's in state government. It's in our budgeting. It's in everything that we do. And we have tools now, the internet mostly, to be able to make transparency much, much easier and much more accessible than it ever has been. So we currently have reporting requirements on when we report. I think we're still in 2-day reporting or something like that. So people get, no, we do. For the governor's office, it extends 30 days after the close of session.
7 or 2.
The second thing is, when you have transparency, that's the essence of the answer. The second thing is, you mentioned that the amount of money has been going up. That's not, at least in the governor's races, that's not true. It's been, I think, 5 million-ish or so for the last 3 or 4 cycles here. And there hasn't been a material hockey stick in that. So I think the rules that we have in Oregon are good. I think you mentioned that we should have the disclaimer of who actually paid for something. I think that's a good addition. I think we do it. I don't know if Bud is doing it, but we certainly do it in the things that we're producing as well. So thank you.
So a hard question to answer in a way. I go along completely with Alan's answer on transparency. I think no dark money. You know where all sources of money are coming from and who's funding it. I think that's an important step. I think it comes down to how do you break into politics and who decides, because how do you finance that issue and who decides who the candidates are. So our Supreme Court has, at least up to now, said that money is speech, and that's what their decision is, and they have decided not to have limits. And again, as a complete outsider coming in who hasn't held office, if I don't have resources, I pretty much don't have the ability to even have a chance to run. And then you have to get vetted through a system, and the question is which system and who are the deciders. And so it's an interesting. I think I'm most comfortable with transparency, no dark money, nothing hidden, and the system the way it is, and I can live with it.
Howdy. Hello. Peter Wendell. This is a question for both of you. What do you plan to do to free Oregon business from unnecessary regulation?
Well, again, the interesting thing, Peter, is as we know, is we just passed 970 additional laws in this last session or session and a half or whatever, and no one's, at least in this area, I don't think anyone's going to feel a meaningful improvement in their traffic congestion, the unaffordability of housing, the homelessness, the mentally ill, et cetera, et cetera. So the futility of government rules in terms of trying to shape and improve society. I really like the way, one issue that Alan's brought up and I brought up, I think 6 months ago, was the sunset of laws. I think that's a very good thing, especially on the financial aspect of laws. I think that's a good way to look at it. I think there's an interesting experiment out of Australia that I'm aware of where they took their nursing homes, which were performing dismally, and they had checklist after checklist of laws, which meant that at 4 a.m. on a Sunday morning, somebody might be wheeled into the rec room because the mandate was that you have to do that, and they were horrible. Then they came up with like 15 principles, and then the principles were followed, and the nursing homes got a lot better without having all these mandates. I'm all for principles, for agencies to work together with the private sector to ensure that needed regulatory environment's there. But again, it's principle-based. And then what you're doing is you're trying to work with the private sector to enhance the private sector to allow it to function freely. And you listen to the private sector and change your rules as the rules are working against you. So it's a government and private sector on the same time. Less rules, more working together, less mandates, I think is the way we need to go. And that's a way that it really works in any system that you try to do.
So I think the answer is exactly what I talked about. It's term limits for bills. And it's a really simple structural solution. And what you'd end up with is you'd have a bill that now you have 2 levers to work with. You have the bill, and then you have how long that bill is going to be in. So you might get somebody to vote for a bill if it only was going to be for 4 years, and they won't vote for it if it's 20. But imagine if we had a bunch of these laws that were rolling off the books. We've actually done it with with tax, it's not tax cuts, it's tax credits. We've actually done it with tax credits, where they do sunset. Many of the tax credits, if there's a general consensus that it was good, they just roll over pretty quickly. But some of them, people go, wait a minute, why do we have this tax credit? We'd have the same thing with bills. And that's the structural thing that I think you need to be able to do. I can't think of another way of going through the 10,000 bills that were passed in the last 10 years, or the 5,000 bills that were passed in the last 10 years, and line item go through every single one of them to try to streamline this. But put a structure in place that will drive the right behavior. Okay. Why don't I stay here? Because, yeah.
Jim Cape, 4 member. Last week we had the 3 Democratic Secretary of State candidates, and all 3 of them said that the John Kitzhaber case was a tragedy. Yet having an old guy fooled by a younger woman is one of the easiest tricks in the book. So do you believe that the John Kitzhaber cautionary tale is a tragedy or a comedy? And secondly, could you discuss your support for the presidential primary? Thank you.
Sure. It's not a comedy because it's not something we should be laughing about. It's a thematic thing that comes out after 30 years of single-party rule, that people just get to the point where they feel that they're invincible and that they can do anything that they want. They don't have to have transparency, that they can pass laws that are hyper-partisan and special interests, that they can take money and they're not held accountable for that. That you can create a situation where you have one definition of what a family is, John and his a person that accompanied him, and another definition where it was 2 households. And you can just make up the rules as you go along. So I don't see anything, it's not a comedy in any stretch of the imagination. It is tragic. It's tragic for Oregon that we got to that point. As far as the Republican, I think that's what you're referring to, since I'm a Republican. There's one really good thing that's coming out of this. There's a bunch of people that are engaged, and there's a bunch of people that are really angry at what's been going on. And there's an awareness about what's been going on in politics where people are saying, hey, wait a minute, my wages are flat. In fact, we were on the radio the other day, and a guy called in and he said, look, I'm homeless. I make $40,000 a year. A third of it goes to the government. A third of it goes to child support and my ex-wife. And then I have to live on a third, and I live on $6 an hour. And I said, where are you living? And he said, well, I live in my truck. He's going to vote this year. And he's really ticked that the system isn't working for him. So no matter who it is on the Republican side, there's an energy and an anger that's coming out that I actually think is really good. And if the Republicans are going to win, we need that kind of energy to be able to win.
I'll do the 1 minute. I hate to see human failure, but I am very concerned that if laws were broken, that the people at the highest level are held accountable to the laws. I don't want people getting off if they're the governor, if they broke the laws. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. In terms of the Republican Party, I'm enthusiastic about our candidates. John Kasich is a proven governor and a congressman. That's his forte, very, very proven in that line of work. Ted Cruz, I haven't seen anyone have a better mind than that man, and he's very firm on the principles that he believes in. And Donald Trump is nobody's puppet. And I think I'm a Republican, so I'm looking at my candidates in their positive light, and I'll probably decide who to vote for the night before, because the morning of, when you're a candidate, you go to the drop box, you drop your ballot in. So I'm probably marking my ballot that night, because we all have our pluses and our minuses. Okay.
John Blackman, 4 member,
You want me?
both candidates. Okay. Economic development without anger. What do you think of a toll road from Wilsonville to Forest Grove to Battleground paid for by private construction company? Thank you.
Yeah. So I think this is a good question in terms of how do we deal with our infrastructure. And because we need more money, I think some of the money can be certainly gotten out of more frugality in our business operations of the state. I really do think the money's there. If you look at the growth of state biennium budgets, the general funds increased $2 billion each of the last 2 bienniums, so that's $4 billion over 4 years. And the all funds budget is quadruple of that, so you're talking about $30 billion, $28-30 billion. So can we find a way, please, to make government more frugal? I know in my medical practice, if we hadn't figured out how to do things way frugally, we would have been long gone and absorbed as in the past. I think it's interesting to consider the concept that the roads that are presently there, the laneage is not tolled, that the increase in laneage would be tolled, so that way you have a choice. And generally what will happen is if people try to do the free part, but eventually they get sick of it and they'll go on the paid part, and so that'll work. And can you bring in sovereign wealth funds and money from around the world as long as we can own it? I think it's a negotiation. That sounds very attractive to me. So I guess I'm in favor of that kind of approach.
So the first thing is there's plenty of money. We've increased the state budget by 63% over the last 10 years. It's $27 billion over the last 10 years. And I'd ask you, is anything 63% better than it was 10 years ago? Do you have 63% more roads or wider roads? Do you have 63% smaller class sizes? Do you have anything that's 63% better than it was 10 years ago? Yet in a business, if we invested 63% more, we'd have to get 100% back because there's this return on investment thing that we work on. As far as the sovereign wealth funds work, we actually had them come in and present to us, one of the things when I worked in the governor's office. And the idea initially sounds pretty good. Here's all this capital that can come in. The thing that I wondered about is how is it that they can generate a commercial rate of return and we can't figure out how to invest our own money? Because if they're willing to generate a commercial rate of return, that's a pretty good return. Yet we can't figure out how to get out of our own way to do it ourselves. So what I'd like to do is understand more about how they're doing that. Where are they getting the money? What is their cost of capital that makes it so attractive for them to do it? And we can't quite figure out how to do it internally. I don't want to abdicate it to them. I want to analyze it a little bit more. But when somebody comes to me and says, I got a great deal for you, I usually reach for my wallet first. One's staying up. Yes.
Mike Mahalik, forum member. My question is sort of directed at Alan. You had the opportunity to be part of Governor Kulongoski's staff, so you have an inside view of what doesn't work in Oregon and why it hasn't worked. So I'd be interested in your observation of how can we change it? Because as voters, we can't always change it. What's wrong with Salem that prevents progress? And then I'd be interested in Bud's view on the same thing, looking from the outside, looking in.
So what's preventing progress in Salem? I'll give you an anecdotal story. We're sitting in the governor's office. All the advisors are sitting around the table. We're talking about spending $20 million, I think it was, on something. And I said, hey, if we called 90 Oregonians in from all over the state, different walks of life, and a nice cross-section of people, and we explained to them what we're doing, what would they say? And everybody looks at me and goes, oh, well, they'd say no. And I say, okay, well, why would we do this? They said, well, they don't understand. So, okay, so we take 2 weeks and we put them in buses and we take them out to the field and we show them all this stuff and we educate them and we train them and we whiteboard and chalk talk it, and then we bring them back in. What would they say? They said, well, they'd say no, right? And so what's the difference? Because that's what the legislature is supposed to be, right? A nice cross-section of people representing all walks of life in Oregon. The difference is the cabal that's been created down in Salem of special interests and lobbyists that all tug this legislation one way or another, and it doesn't reflect you. That was the whole point of what I was saying. It doesn't reflect your values and your aspirations. They've been doing it for 30 years, and it's become so incestuous that they just reflect the values of themselves and not yours. So what do we have to do? We've got to break that. And I think the easiest way to break that is elect a governor that's directly elected by the people, that's independent, that hasn't been part of that for the last 30 years, and we can make those changes. Thank you.
So I'm going to slow the process down. You know, in medical politics, you commonly go into a meeting where your input is wanted, and you're sitting there and you realize the whole thing is a show where you're supposed to be in there and to show that you're participating. The decision's already been made behind closed doors. That's very obvious, and we all feel that. I think it'd be very interesting for the governor to say, I'm happy to meet with leadership of your caucus in an open meeting to bring forth the ideas of your concept with the press involved and a full discussion. And you say, I'm not interested in talking to you about it behind closed doors. And if we want to do educational reform, let's start the process that way. Let's decide on our principles of where we want to go and engage, and then we can develop the process out in light. I think way too much done behind the scenes, all of it really, and then we're just used as props, we citizens. So again, that needs to change. Okay.
Chris Leslie, foreign member. I'm thinking, as has been mentioned here today, about all the millions of dollars lost. Have you or both thought about any way of getting back that money?
Lost in just waste? You mean the waste that we keep spending
waste.
over? Yeah. Well,
Like the bridge and
Sure. I agree.
Portland?
Okay, good question. So again, 300 million cover Oregon, 200 million Columbia River crossing. We're going to spend 250 million studying the cleanup of the Port of Portland Superfund, but without doing any cleanup. $1 billion going on business tax credits, 21 billion in negative in PERS, and if we use a 4% assumed return rate, it might be 100 billion. It's really a scary number when you look at that. I think you use Secretary of State's office to audit, and you dig in and you just try to find where really the money has been lost, and it just argues that strict budgets have to be set and careful monitoring when the state's involved, because a lot of people love to do business with the state because it's so easy to steal the state's money. It's so easy to steal the government's money. So unfortunately, that's true. So more attention to detail. Use the Secretary of State. Hopefully, we have one of the two Republican candidates as Secretary of State. Thank you.
So the question is how to get the money back. We're not going to get the money back. But we can stand up and say this isn't happening anymore. That we can elect somebody as governor who in a 2-minute conversation can say that bridge is fundamentally flawed and we're not spending $200 million on that dumb idea. We can elect a governor that in 2-minute conversation can look at a $310 million website. Shoot, my 4-year-old grandchild who can work my iPhone better than I can I could say to him, hey, Junior, what do you think? $300 million for a website? He'd go, no, Peepa. And it'd be done right there, right? Right? We're not going to be able to claw that money back. But we can say no. We can say stop this. We can say we need somebody who's representing us and representing our interests. That's what we can do on a go-forward basis. We've had enough of the fiascos. We've had enough of $27 billion in a $22 billion hole for the public employee retirement system. I actually have a solution for it. A defined contribution program and hire less people than those that retire, and it's fixed. Right? Elect me as governor, we'll start fixing these problems. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Spencer Ehrman, member of the forum. In the last 3 months, we have seen a crystal clear example of abject failure in government regulation, in that DEQ has not been enforcing their own air quality regulations. This has come to light in view of the heavy metals pollution scandal in Southeast Portland particularly, and in North Portland. There's been a failure of leadership at DEQ. It's been disappointing that in the supposedly the greenest state in the country, the governor's office has not insisted that DEQ do their job. My question is, as governor, how will you reform DEQ so that they take the initiative to enforce the regulations that are already on their books and that they have the ability to enforce if they simply take the initiative and do their job?
It's a matter of priorities. How many of you take your car to DEQ and have it checked? Raise your hand. How many of you have ever failed? Okay. Okay. No, not you. So everybody takes their car to have failed over your entire life, right? Yet we have all this infrastructure in place, and we have all those people employed to test things that never fail. Why would we do that, right? Why would you do that? And then we have the arsenic release. That's a clear failure. So why don't we not test cars that don't fail? I know that's a double negative, but you get it. Why don't we not test cars that don't fail? Why don't we take those resources and put them into the areas where we really need enforcement, right? This is where the government is flipped upside down. There's this cabal, there's this institution that wants to keep that in place. We have to break that down, and we just have to say no. And by the way, all the new cars, I think it's 150,000 miles or 10 years, you have to meet your emissions requirements over that period of time. So we're testing something that's already certified by the manufacturer to meet those requirements. And it just doesn't make any sense. That's how we solve these problems.
Unless, of course, you're a VW diesel owner, and then they didn't actually follow that. So maybe a little testing rarely. We'll go ahead and do that. So the Republican Party must be the party of the environment. It started off with Teddy Roosevelt and Yellowstone Park. He had a great Klamath River project. That was fabulous. And Tom McCall, the greatest environmental governor in our state's history. So again, we must be the party of the environment. How do we get regulatory agencies to deal with what they're regulating? Number one is you have the right leadership in the regulatory agency. You don't have old lobbyists and people that help you politically running agencies, which seems to be the way of many government agencies are led by as political payoffs. You need a visionary leader who's interested in environmentalism and probably a COO, a chief operating officer, to keep the thing on budget. And then again, you have to prioritize what you're doing. And I do think there's got to be a positive relationship between what you're regulating and the regulatory agency. In other words, the sense of being regulated is that if you're doing your job right and you're attempting to meet the regulations, you're not hiding anything. If you go askew, there isn't much of a problem. But if you're hiding things and breaking the law, there's a big problem. So again, if the regulatory agency is feared, people will hide it. So again, we have to rethink regulation. We're on the same side. We're going to have the best environment. We're going to work together.
Okay, real quick, because I'm violating the rules here. A question for both of you. Oregon just passed a draconian minimum wage law. Is there anything we can do to roll that back, or is this an example of the horse has left the barn?
Okay. So minimum wage was placed into statute, so it can be rolled back, but it would take a vote that both houses. So I think if you're going to ever get there, you need to say, well, what is your answer? Because clearly there are a lot of people that don't make enough money. And the minimum wage attempt is an attempt to make business pay more money. And a lot of businesses are struggling. They can't pay a lot of money. I looked at my medical practice, which is mostly 2-year RNs, some masters, PA, and nurse practitioners, and high school graduates, and then the doctors are separate. But out of that pool of workers, the average wage is $37 an hour. And the reason it is we're well compensated, we take care of our employees, and that's where you have to go. So obviously the first answer is you need $20, $30, $40 an hour jobs for people so that they're not poor. That's the real answer. Stimulate the private sector, work with the private sector, create wealth and prosperity, and that's the answer. To try to get people to change this, you have to offer something. And I would offer the following package in exchange for a minimum wage relook or repeal or redo. Thanks. I would suggest that we don't make people that make $10 an hour or less don't have them pay state income taxes, because that'll give more of their own money in their own pocket, which is the goal. I would strengthen the earned income tax credit, put more money in so the federal government will match the money to a much higher degree. And I would do something about child care, because right now for infant child care is $11,000 a year in this area. And for a 7-year-old, it's like $8,500 a year. It's more than expensive college. And a lot of working young people is killing them. And so if you want to help people, it is don't have them pay taxes when they don't make enough money, get them a better earned income tax credit, and figure out a child care program that doesn't break them.
So first of all, I want everyone to make more money. I want all of you to have more money in your pocket. And in fact, Oregonians have been getting poorer over the last 30 years. We've gone from about 22nd in the country in terms of the amount of money that you earn to 33rd in the country in the amount of money that you earn. Now, the fact that we passed the minimum wage in a short session in the dark of night, crammed through without fully vetting it, is awful. This is a massive economic issue for the state. One of the things that they never calculated is what impact does this have on the state budget? And therefore, where is that money going to come from? Because what you actually do is compress the first 7 layers of the wage scale. And so now, when a janitor hires in, entry-level janitor, they're paid the same as a physician's assistant. The first negotiation is going to be, okay, well, the physician's assistant should make more, and on up. I think it could be as much as a 30% increase across all of state government, which is hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, and they didn't calculate it. How can they pass this bill and not calculate that? The solution that they're going to come back with is called IP 28, Initiative Petition 28. They'll call it a tax on sales. It's a sales tax. It's something that you really need to dig into. I'll tell you the way it works. If the Ford Motor Company sells a truck to the dealer, it's 2.5%. That dealer sells the truck to you, it's 2.5%. That's a compounded 5% that you're going to pay. It's worse than that. It's on your electric bill. It's on all your food. It's on your medications. It's on all the services that you pay in the state. That's their solution to this problem. It's just not acceptable. I'll catch on.
Dick Cartwright, as one of you mentioned earlier, and this would be for both of you if you don't mind, as you mentioned, the state is, I think, ranked, and I think the Oregonian said this the other day also, we rank, I think, 49th in the highest food stamps and welfare. And if you don't believe it, go over to Albertsons someday and watch how many people pay with actually money. Anyway, point being, would either of you, to stop some of the fraud in that, would you consider drug testing for those that are receiving a lot of these different programs where it's a freebie?
So on the food stamp program, SNAP program, it is sobering to think that we're the highest in the country in terms of the number of families that rely on that to be able to feed their families. And it's absolutely something that we need to address. As far as I can tell, nobody really addresses fraud and abuse of that system. There are technology tools that are out there today that would very easily allow us to detect fraud and abuse, to detect when 2 people are using the same food stamps or transferring it between people or applying for it multiple times. There's absolutely technology that would allow us to do that. And this is a multi-billion-dollar program, and there's multi-hundreds of millions or billions of dollars that we could save from that. Now, I'll also tell you that, again, when I worked in Salem, nobody seemed to care because it's federal dollars. And somehow federal dollars are magic dollars, right? They just appear. They're printed, usually. A third of them are printed, but they just kind of appear. So I'd get questions like, Alan, why would you want to find waste and abuse? Because it's just federal dollars anyway, right? We just wouldn't accept those federal dollars. Those federal dollars are our dollars. They're your dollars. It all comes from the same place. And just because we happen to print it, which I think is absolutely the wrong thing to be doing, we'll never balance the budget if we don't attack these things, is the wrong way to go. So the fundamental thing that we have to do is put systems in place to detect fraud and abuse. That's step number 1. And not treat those federal dollars as if some tooth fairy came out here from Washington, D.C. and gave it to us.
So again, with prosperity, less people on food stamps is a great goal. And as long as a successful governor will have 500,000 people on food stamps in 6 years because they won't need food stamps. And that's obviously what we want to do. Clearly, any program, especially government programs, riddled with fraud and abuse at all levels. And you have to have tight internal controls on how to deal with that. You need to listen to people who are experts in the field and to make sure that the people that are using them are using them appropriately. I am not opposed to drug testing as long as the use of the drug test is to get someone into treatment, and as long as they get into treatment, they can maintain their benefit. I'm not going to use that as a upfront tool to exclude people. I think what we want to do with our drug testing programs is identify people that need to have help, and then if they don't participate, then I think that's a legitimate use. But I think the first step always with people that have addictions is to try to turn their life around and to use possibly that benefit as a carrot-stick approach to try to get them to help themselves. Because the ultimate goal is for everyone to be as successful as possible, and when you're addicted to drugs, your life is ruined.
Harry Bodine, Forum member. The state currently is engaged in a legal battle with Oracle, and I think we've spent $2 million so far, maybe?
10 or 12 or something.
10 or, it's up there.
It's up there.
The question is, would you continue that suit if you had the authority to stop it?
Yeah. I have a military background. I'm a little blunt and cantankerous, but I really prefer peace. We're not at war. We should not be at war with ourselves. We shouldn't be at war with business or other citizens or private companies. And we should go into a dispute resolution and mediation and see if we can somehow come to a satisfactory conclusion to this. That's be my approach.
Yeah, the Oracle lawsuit, it is much higher than $2 million. We should settle it. In fact, I believe there was a settlement where they kind of had a handshake on it, and then it all blew up. It's one of the observations that I had of working in Salem is that between business people, when you make a deal and you shake hands, you pretty much have to stick with that deal, right? And the organizations have to adhere to that. And if the deal goes off the rails, you get the organizations back together and you straighten them out. In politics, they shake hands and immediately go out and break their word. And it happens over and over and over again. The only resolution is to take a vote. And that's the only way they get past that. I think it's awful. Another example of misguided use and where politics doesn't understand business is, you might not have even heard about this, but the state of Oregon sued Freightliner for $300 million. Did you know that? And it was over a technicality on a patent settlement. And I think at the time they were the third largest employer of the state. And rather than sit down and say, hey, we got this problem, and we think there's grounds to do this, can we kind of discuss this and work through it and talk about your future in the state? This is after they've already opened up a big facility in North Carolina. We just sued them for $300 million. That's ridiculous. But that's kind of the mentality that we've got down there. That has to change, or we're fundamentally not going to be able to move the state forward. Thank you.
Tom Lee, for a
I
member.
just figured out how to do this.
No,
Is it
I'm
over?
sorry, but yeah, but I'm gonna ask you guys can hang out.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to close.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Sorry about that. Sorry about the confusion. It's nice when we have more questioners than we have time, in a sense, and I'm hopeful that Mr. Alley and Dr. Pierce will be able to hang out for at least a little bit to be able to chat with our questioners and maybe some of the folks that didn't walk up there. But first, before anything else, please join me in thanking these two gentlemen for spending their time with us today, Mr. Alley and Dr. Pierce. Thank you very much for answering our questions and your presentations. Next week, next Monday, we're going to take a good look at the primary elections in District 27 and 28. And we also have Dan Cross, who's a candidate for Justice of the Peace. He will make a short presentation. And there'll be a little bit of a surprise. A gentleman from Awesome Beaverton, which I know it says Beaverton, but it's a Washington County group, will actually be here to just give you a little bit of stuff on that. On May 9th, we will be looking at District 26. And we'll also be looking at the Washington County Commission race, the contested race between Rogers and Claybrooks. And on the 16th, the day before the primary election, we decided we weren't going to throw a whole bunch of election stuff at you. We're going to take a look at early childhood education in Washington County, how it's funded, what they're doing to help prepare kids for success. Once again, thank you to our speakers. Thank you guys for being here. I know there's a few guests that are not members. If you've left without a sheet of paper that says, this is how you join, you haven't been here. So please make sure you get a remit envelope or a piece of information about the forum. If you have any questions, ask Eric, ask me, and thank you so much for being here. See you next Monday. Thank you.